Chapter 1. Poshtova Square. October 1989 arrived in Kyiv quietly, but with insistence, like a thought that refused to be ignored. The afternoon light was warm and low, turning the fallen chestnut leaves into small coins underfoot. Coal smoke drifted from unseen courtyards, mixing with the sweet, powdery scent of Krasnaya Moskva perfume. The city smelled old, tired, and strangely alive. Poshtova Square was crowded in a way that felt both familiar and newly chaotic. People queued for things they weren't sure they needed, simply because they might not be there tomorrow. Babushkas argued over places in line. A man sold newspapers with headlines that hinted, carefully, at change. Faded Soviet slogans clung to the walls like ghosts, partially covered by fresh posters calling people to meetings, discussions, futures. Lev stood near the tram stop, his Jupiter reel-to-reel recorder hanging from his shoulder. He adjusted the microphone, listening intently. He was not interested in speeches or chants. He wanted the in-between sounds, the squeal of metal wheels, the murmur of conversations in Ukrainian and Russian, the nervous laughter that surfaced too quickly. This was the sound of a city unsure of itself. He stepped backward without looking, absorbed in the movement of the tape reels. The collision was sudden and sharp. A violin case slipped from unfamiliar hands and hit the pavement. The clasps sprang open with a dry click, and sheet music spilled out, caught briefly by the wind. Lev froze, then dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry, truly, he said, gathering pages. For one brief, unguarded second, he saw the inside of the case, dark velvet, worn smooth, and a thin blue and yellow ribbon sewn along the edge. She snapped the case shut almost immediately. Their eyes met. Hers were dark, tired, and alert, as if the world had trained her to expect danger even in accidents. His apology stalled somewhere between his throat and his mouth. He handed her the pages. On the top one he read the title, Tchaikovsky's Serenade Melancholique. "Iryna," she said after a pause, as if offering her name made the moment safer. "Lev," he replied. The bell of an approaching tram rang, insistent and metallic, breaking the spell. Chapter 2. The Sanctuary of the Tram. They boarded Route 12, the Lastivka, without discussion, as though the decision had already been made for them. The tram groaned as it started moving, its wooden benches polished smooth by decades of coats and winter scarves. The windows rattled softly, and the air inside carried the warm, electric smell of old machinery. There were only a few passengers, enough to remind them of reality, not enough to intrude. They sat side by side, careful at first, leaving a polite distance that quickly felt unnecessary. Silence settled between them, not awkward, but dense, full of unasked questions. Lev shifted, then reached into his bag and pulled out his headphones. They were large, clumsy, impossible to ignore. "It's not music," he said quietly, almost apologetically. Iryna studied his face for a moment, then nodded. He placed one earphone over her ear, keeping the other for himself. The sound that filled the space between them was wind moving through chestnut trees on Kreshatik, layered with distant church bells. No rhythm, no melody, just the city, breathing and unaware of being recorded. Iryna closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she smiled, not politely, but with genuine surprise. "It sounds honest," she said, "like it doesn't pretend to be anything else." Lev felt something loosen in his chest. Outside, the tram rolled onward, carrying them away from the square and deeper into something unnamed. Chapter 3. Words Beneath the Noise. Conversation came slowly, slipping between the rattles and hums of the tram. They spoke in low voices, trusting the noise to keep their words private. She told him about the conservatory, about endless rehearsals, about professors who spoke of tradition as if it were law, about the difficulty of finding good strings, and how every performance felt like an act of compromise. He told her about Dovzhenko film studios, about microphones older than both of them, about his quiet obsession with recording things that were about to vanish. "I feel like I'm practicing the music of a past century," she said after a pause, staring at the window, "for a future I can't see." Lev nodded. "I'm trying to record the sound of the city's soul," he said, "before it changes forever." The tram slowed as it approached the pedestrian bridge. Sunlight flooded the carriage, catching dust in the air and turning it gold. The Dnipro stretched wide and gray beneath them. In the distance, the Lavra's domes glowed softly, while the massive Motherland statue loomed, unmoving and contradictory. Their shoulders touched. Almost without thinking, Lev reached for her hand, not to claim it, not to hold it tightly, but simply to acknowledge the moment. She did not pull away. For a long second, the city seemed to pause with them. Chapter 4. The Bitter Sweetness of Arrival. The tram jerked forward again, breaking the stillness. Podio approached too quickly. The end of the line waited with quiet cruelty. Urgency settled between them. Iryna reached into her case, pulled out a pencil, and wrote something quickly on the margin of her sheet music. She tore the corner off and pressed it into his hand. "Not an address," she said softly. "Not yet." Lev unfolded the paper. "Чекаю на трамвай 12, щопонеділка о 17:30. I wait for tram number 12 every Monday at 5:30 p.m. The doors hissed open. Cold air rushed in. Voices, movement. She looked at him one last time, long enough to say everything they hadn't, and then she was gone, swallowed by the Podil market. Lev remained standing, the scrap of paper warm in his palm. He looked at the empty space beside him, then at the city beyond the window. He pressed record. The tram pulled away, its hum stretching into something almost like music, the last melody of their meeting, captured on tape, suspended between loss and hope. Chapter 5. The Space After. The tram carried Lev away from Podil, but something of Iryna remained with him, suspended in the narrow aisle where she had stood. The city outside the window blurred into motion, yet inside him everything felt unnaturally still. He unfolded the scrap of paper again, tracing the penciled words with his thumb as if they might change. That evening, his apartment felt smaller than usual. The radiator clicked without warmth, and the single bulb above the kitchen table cast a tired yellow light. Lev set up his Jupiter recorder and rewound the tape from that afternoon. The familiar sounds emerged, the metallic sigh of the doors, a cough, footsteps. Then silence, thick, almost unbearable. He labeled the reel carefully, writing in neat, deliberate letters. Route 12, October 1989, Bridge. For the first time since he had begun recording the city, he felt that the sounds were no longer only about Kyiv. They were about absence, about the shape someone left behind after leaving a room. He lay awake long into the night, listening to the distant hum of traffic, wondering whether memory could be a form of music. Chapter 6. Waiting. Monday arrived with a thin, uncertain rain. Lev told himself he had no expectations as he stood at the tram stop on Poshtova Square at 17:15, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. He listened. The square sounded different on weekdays, more resigned, less theatrical. At 17:25, he considered leaving. At 17:29, he almost did. Then he saw her. Iryna stood slightly apart from the others, violin case resting against her leg. Her coat was buttoned high, her hair tucked away, as if she were trying not to draw attention. When their eyes met, she did not smile immediately. Instead, she exhaled, as though confirming that the world was still capable of keeping small promises. They boarded the tram together. This time their shoulders touched without hesitation. They spoke quietly, carefully, about nothing urgent: the cold, the leaking roof at the conservatory, a broken string she still hadn't been able to replace. Yet beneath the words ran something steadier than excitement: recognition. When they parted that evening, there was no drama, only the understanding that Monday had gained meaning. Chapter 7. The Shape of Weeks. Autumn dissolved into winter almost without warning. Their meetings did not become more frequent, but they became deeper, layered with familiarity. Some Mondays were filled with conversation, others passed almost entirely in silence. Both felt necessary. Lev stopped recording obsessively. Instead, he chose moments: the faint sound of Iryna humming while looking out the window, the whisper of her coat as she shifted closer, the tram's hum swelling as they crossed the bridge. Sometimes he didn't press record at all, afraid of breaking the spell. Outside the tram, the city was changing faster now. Flags appeared where portraits once hung. Words like independence and future were spoken aloud, clumsily at first, then with growing confidence. Inside the tram, time behaved differently. Their world remained contained, fragile, moving forward on rails laid decades before either of them was born. Once, as snow began to fall over the Dnipro, Iryna rested her head briefly on Lev's shoulder. He did not move. The moment passed, leaving behind a quiet certainty that neither of them named. Chapter 8. Andreevsky Descent. It was Iryna who broke the unspoken rules. "Let's get off here," she said one Monday, as the tram slowed near Andreevsky Descent. The street was alive despite the cold. Artists sold paintings that no one could officially approve of, icons beside abstract cityscapes. A man played the bandura, its sound thin but stubborn. The air smelled of damp stone, oil paint, and cheap coffee. They walked slowly, close enough to feel each other's warmth. Iryna stopped often, studying faces, colors, details. "I come here when I'm tired of being careful," she said quietly. Lev watched her, realizing that he was learning her not through confessions, but through these choices, where she paused, what she looked at, what she refused to explain. He wanted to record this too, but knew he never could. They did not kiss. Somehow, that restraint felt like respect for the moment, for the city, for the uncertainty that still surrounded them. Chapter 9. Absence. Winter hardened its grip on Kyiv. One Monday, Iryna did not come. Lev waited until the cold numbed his feet, listening to the square grow emptier. The tram arrived and left. He stayed. She did not come the next Monday either. On the third week, he stood there longer than before, staring at the tracks as snow gathered between the rails. Only later did he learn, through a quiet chain of acquaintances, that her mother had fallen ill, that Iryna had gone to Lviv, that life had once again made decisions without asking. That evening, Lev played his recordings back to himself: the tram, the bridge, the silence. He understood then that not every melody resolves. Some exist only to remind you that you once listened closely and that it mattered.